Hello and welcome to the Sounds a Bit Woo-Woo to Me podcast. Each week we'll take a deep dive look into an alternative therapy, spiritual practice, or a holistic wellbeing approach that might raise a skeptical eyebrow, be slightly misunderstood, and for some be considered a bit woo-woo. Here's this week's episode. Hello and welcome to the podcast. My name is Becky Taylor. I am a yoga teacher and a wellbeing enthusiast. This week, I'm joined by Suzy Redding. Now, Suzy wears many hats. She is a psychologist, a yoga teacher, an author many times over, and has an army of Instagram fans who she talks to daily about all things self-care. So who better to delve into the topic of what exactly is self-care than with Suzy Redding. Suzy Redding, welcome to the podcast today. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me, Becky. I'm thrilled.
So we've known each other for a little while. We connected on Instagram and then we did some work together. And I know you to be sort of super kind, generous, compassionate person through the work that you do and how you address people on your social media. And so when I was thinking about this podcast and who I would like to have on, obviously you came to mind. So I'm super grateful that you're taking some time out to have a chat today. Now, what we're looking at on this show is taking a closer look at the things that are often considered a little bit woo-woo, you know, the kind of practices and methods that can be misunderstood. Those can be things like spiritual practices, alternative therapies, holistic treatments. And so today I'd really like to take a deep dive look with you at self-care, seeing as you are the self-care queen, really. So, you know, I guess my first question is, it's such a broad term. We hear it a lot. So what does self-care mean to you? What's the definition, both academically but also personally in your life?
Okay. Well, the academic definition of self-care is the ability of individuals, families, and communities to promote health, to prevent disease and maintain health, and to cope with illness and disability with or without the support of a healthcare provider. In a lot of the literature you see and a lot of government websites, a real focus of self-care from that perspective is the management of symptoms or, how to adhere to your medications or how to avoid winding up in the GP clinic for things that you can sort out at home. And from my perspective, I think that's really, it's a little limited, it's kind of limited to the absence of ill health. From my perspective, I think it's the simplest way I can express it is self-care is healthcare. It's nourishment for the head, the heart, and the body, and it's taking care of yourself in this moment and also lovingly tending to the person that you are becoming, your future self. And from that perspective, it's more than just managing symptoms. It's actually nourishing ourselves so that we can be the kind of people that we aspire to be.
That's such a lovely definition. I love the nourishing your head, heart and body, and also looking ahead to the future not just doing it for today, but sort of cumulatively, if you have a self-care practice, how that will manifest in your life going forward. So it's not really something that we just need to use to pull us out of difficult times and darkness. It's something that we should be trying to incorporate throughout our lives, almost without thinking about it, if possible, just becomes second nature.
Absolutely. Just like brushing your teeth, There are things that we do to help us navigate big emotions, to help us manage stress. What I'm hoping that definition will highlight is that this is not easy. It's not easy to take care of ourselves, and it's not easy to delay gratification. So if anyone's having a tough time with this, you're in really good company, go gently. What I'm also hoping is that our conversation will show people that there are so many different ways that we can nourish ourselves. And, this is how we cope. It's how we heal and restore. It's how we boost our resilience. And gosh, I think this chapter of our lives has just shown us how important it is to do that proactively, because life is inherently stressful and no one is immune from that. So we're going to hopefully get really practical, Becky, and give people a real idea of how they can do it in a workable, manageable way. But in a potent way that really does make a tangible difference.
Absolutely. And that's what we want to get to the crux of, really. This term self-care has been on the rise, I guess, in the last 5 to 10 years. It seems like it's come more and more to the forefront and we're talking about it more. But there's still a lot of unknown about quite what that is. People aren't quite sure, sometimes whether they're doing it properly or what it is that they should be doing. Is there kind of a one size fits all checklist? Because you know how we sort of know that we have to eat 5 vegetables, fruit or vegetables a day, or it might be 7 now, drink 2 litres of water, get a bit of fresh air. We can be like, tick, 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 I've done all that. I've looked after myself. But is there the same kind of structure for a self-care practice?
I think that's such an insightful question. And the answer is yes and no. Basically, we all need the same things to function as a human being. So you've already mentioned things like nutrition, hydration, movement. We need to pay attention to our sleep needs. We need social connection to feed the soul. We also need time in nature. But in terms of the nitty-gritty of self-care practices, what resonates for one person might not resonate for the next. And the other thing that makes self-care confusing is that sometimes what works for you in one moment won't be appropriate in the next. So we really need a broad toolkit from which to draw. And there are some, what I call the energy bank basics that we do need to cover, but then there is this a great deal of latitude for freedom and choice in how it is that we take care of ourselves, whether it's a journaling practice or a yoga pose, a breathing exercise, watching the moving cloudscape, listening to a piece of music. There are so many different things, and a toolkit will serve us all well. Actually, having it written down really makes a difference.
Yeah, and I know that you have devised, and you talk a lot about in your books and online as well, the vitality wheel, which is something that you've come up with, which is kind of 8 prongs of things that we should be looking to cover off. So I guess it's looking at that and implementing that in a way that feels comfortable to each of us as individuals. Because, for example, for relaxation, I love a long hot bath. That is where I go to chill out and think and decompress from the day. Whereas I know my other half absolutely hates baths, and he would hate that. He'd much rather go for a run to get that same kind of benefit of decompressing, having a think, having a bit of alone time. So I wondered if we could talk about the vitality wheel and the spokes of it, and then I guess the listeners can then kind of work out which elements of that they naturally resonate with and which they do more of and which they do less of. So I guess starting at the top, like I've already talked about, relaxation, breathing, and getting good rest is super, super important. What are the other building blocks of that wheel?
The only thing to note there with the first spoke of the wheel, is sleep, rest, relaxation, and breathing, is that I think we all know that sleep is absolutely fundamental for our well-being, but we need to be honest and acknowledge that we can't make ourselves sleep. There are times in our life when we can make all the right healthy choices and still good sleep is inaccessible. And for people that are in that boat, just go gently and relax. And I mean that literally, rest, restore. And for those that are saying, are you joking? I have no time for that. I understand. Well, we have the breathing to work with, because sleep, rest, relaxation, and breathing all stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest portion of the nervous system. So I hope that can provide some light relief for those that are feeling sleep deprived right now. So the second spoke of the vitality wheel is called movement and nutrition. And the reason why I call it movement rather than exercise is that any movement has potent antidepressant effect. It doesn't need to be going to the gym or playing sport or organized fitness. It can be as simple as having a little boogie, or hoovering counts, or getting outside and weeding the garden. It all adds up, and it's about moving for mental health, not just the physical body. And the same thing with nutrition. I think we often think about when we've got to feed the body, but we need to feed our brain so that we can think straight, so that we've got access to a sense of humor.
Yeah. I love that you could get your movement in just by cleaning the house. That's great. You don't need to go to the gym so much.
Absolutely. It all counts.
Yeah, or having a little boogie. I had a little boogie this morning, actually, so ticked that off already. And then coping skills as well. What do you mean by this?
Okay, so this is where we draw on the wisdom of CBT, mindfulness, and also yoga philosophy. These are the things that just help us reframe our thinking, that can be a distraction from toxic thoughts, worry, anxiety. So examples of coping tools, we can turn to the breath to help soothe us. We could use a mantra to occupy the mind with something constructive, like I soften into this moment, or I give myself permission to feel. Or we could turn to mindfulness as a way of helping us cope, reminding ourselves that it's okay to think our thoughts and feel our feelings. They're just a passing state. We can observe with compassion, and then we can choose what it is that we do next.
I love having a mantra. I have some pinned on the inside of our bathroom cabinet. So every morning when I wake up, there's sort of mantras, affirmations, things that have just resonated with me. And I find that really works because it's a visual reminder to think of those things, and just to take a moment while I'm brushing my teeth, or I don't know, getting whatever out of the cupboard, just to think, oh yeah, that's what I should be thinking today. That's what I should be trying to implement in my day. So that's an example of how I work it into my life. And like we were going back to earlier, there's different ways. These things might sing to people in different ways, and they can implement them into their lives differently. For some, it might be listening to an MP3 sort of on loop of affirmations or mantras or things like that. I find it fascinating how we all gravitate towards different means and methods of implementing these things.
And I love that what you're doing is turning an everyday action into something nourishing by giving it your full attention, your presence, by setting that intention. And that's what mantras and affirmations do. It's intentional living, isn't it?
Yeah.
Giving our actions purpose. So something as simple as washing your hands, if you bear witness to that experience, the sensation of it, the cleansing property of the water, and add something like, I let go of what I no longer need, it transforms a meaningless act into something really powerful. It's a very simple way of dotting our day with these little micro moments of nourishment and care. And for those that are feeling like, I don't have time for this stuff, well, this is how you make time.
Absolutely. And I guess I've got a copy of the Vitality Wheel in front of me, looking at the next couple of spokes of it, your physical environment and social connections, these things have been really impacted recently. We're recording this in September 2020, so we're sort of coming out of COVID, but it's still a worldwide issue. And yes, we might be able to move around a little bit more at the moment in the UK, but there's still these difficulties there in terms of our physical environment. A lot of us are spending a lot more time at home, not being able to get out as much. And social connections, you might not be able to go visit your family, your friends, or if you do, not like you would have done before in terms of giving them a hug. So those things that are in the Vitality Wheel have really taken a knock recently. What do you advise in terms of addressing that, and how we're having to live at the moment in these sort of coronavirus times?
I think when it comes to the physical environment, if we can make our environment as conducive to our well-being as possible. Now, I'm not talking about you have to Marie Kondo your house. If you have the time and the impulse, by all means, go for it. But it can be as simple as having a little nook in your house that provides comfort, whether it's, a simple throw that you like to pop over your lap or your shoulders, or what I like to do is have little focal points throughout the house. By the kitchen sink, I have an image of my dad, the walk along the cliff tops in Sydney that I used to do as a child. And that it gives me something to draw. It draws my eye and it fills my cup. It's so simply done. It's also reminding us that we need nature to soothe and calm us. So if you can't, get out into nature's beauty. If you can't, go there in your mind's eye. The place that I love the most, my spiritual home, is Curl Beach back in Australia. I haven't been there physically for 3 years, but I close my eyes and I go there in my mind every day, and it sustains me. So this is how we can make it accessible in this time of genuine impingement. We don't have the same freedoms at the moment. It won't be like this forever, but we've got to be creative in how we use these tools to nourish us. And with social connection, you're absolutely right. We've lost a great deal of incidental connection. The power of touch, my goodness, so many people have been deprived of that. Really, we're being called upon to be creative in how it is that we plug in, but also being mindful in how that connection can deplete us. That technology that's so essential for us to stay connected can actually overstimulate. So we need to find the balance between communicating care, staying current, but also being mindful of the health of our nervous system.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the social connection, loss that we experience, particularly at the height of the pandemic, has had such a knock-on effect for people. And especially, as you say, those people that are perhaps living alone and don't live near their family. One of my questions on that was going to be noticing friends or family that are struggling. Is there a way to encourage a self-care practice without sort of sounding patronizing, if you know what I mean? Or is the clue in the name that it's got to come from the self? You can't really advise somebody, well, actually, I think you should be meditating, or have you stuck any mantras above your sink today? Or, how can we help others, as I say, without stepping on their toes and being too invasive about it?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. We want to invite, we want to encourage, we want to make gentle suggestions, but we don't want to preach, and we don't want to make people feel like they're being coerced. And there is, like I said before, such great variety in what resonates. So I think one of the best ways of encouraging people to nourish themselves is by talking about it, having open and honest conversations about our health, in particular, our mental and emotional health. By modeling healthy behavior, we lead by example, and just letting people know that you're there and offering to be of support and asking what would be useful. If you're worried about someone, it's okay to ask. And, in tough times, I think a lot of people are just waiting for someone to say, oh, could you help me with this? But it's very hard to reach out. So as a friend, as a family member, we can do the reaching out and let people know that we're here, but also remind them that it's okay to shape the help that we offer, because sometimes what we think is going to be helpful mightn't be. So inviting that option to shape and to, talk openly and honestly about supporting each other.
Yeah, and it's part of the wider conversation that is ongoing in society today about mental health and looking after each other and one another, and that it's not a weakness to ask for help. In fact, it's incredibly empowering if you can do that and speak for yourself and step up and recognise that you need a certain amount of care, or you need some support or whatever. That's actually super empowering that you're able to voice that. So I think, just reaching out to people and being there and offering that help can often open the door for that. With that in mind, the next spoke on your vitality wheel is mood boosters. So for me, I often have been telling my friends what I've been doing in lockdown and over these last few months to help me. So I like to do a lot of yoga. I like to go for walks, and sharing those tips of what works for me. So when we're talking about mood boosters, is that the type of thing that you mean?
Yeah, it is. It's anything that lifts your spirits, gets the happies going. I divide it into two different strands. We've got mood boosting activities and mood boosting skills. And again, these are really individual. So you've mentioned activities like yoga, meditation, movement. It's your visual diet. It's what you're taking in through your senses, the music, the TED Talks, podcasts, books, shows, all of that stuff. It's also things like scent and color. They can be mood boosting activities. It's also skills. And this is the stuff that when you weave these things into your life, it becomes a way of life. And for people that are thinking, I just don't have time or energy for this stuff, the mood boosting skills really do make a tangible difference. And they are kindness, compassion, curiosity, self-forgiveness, gratitude, and savoring. Now, savoring is one of my favorites, and that is the ability to suck the life out of a pleasurable experience. And once you get good at savoring, there is something to savor in every moment, whether it's the past by reminiscing, the present moment by bearing witness with all of your senses and enjoying it with abandon. And then there's also savoring the future by anticipating. So this is really powerful stuff. And for families, when you savor together, this is how we create a sense of belonging, a sense of lineage. It's really powerful.
And all the words that you use then, they're all positive words. Compassion, savouring, kindness, they're all already, by thinking about implementing those, they already have a positive impact because you just associate those things with goodness, with things that you want in your life. And I love that term savouring. I've never really thought about that before, but I really smiled when you said that. I was like, oh yes, savouring. I'm going to think about that more over the weekend and savour.
That's right. They're things that we're already doing. But when you give it a name, it becomes more salient as a skill, as a habit. Then you start to look for more opportunities to use it. You become more effective at doing it. And it's like, like we were talking about mindfulness before, there's a mindfulness muscle. Mindfulness helps us savor. And all of these skills, they have a cumulative effect. And yeah, we can weave them into our day with such simplicity, but real effect.
Yeah, so there's mood boosting skills, and then there's also the activities, the yoga, the getting out, the whatever.
Yeah.
One question I wanted to ask, kind of off the back of that, is, like I've said, I like to have a long bath. Some people might like go out and have their nails done. They can do that now at the moment, or get their hair done, or something aesthetic, whatever. What is the difference then between self-care and what some might perceive as self-indulgence? Where's the line?
I think it comes back to that definition of self-care nourishes us in this moment and also tends to our future self, right? It cares for our future self. Self-indulgence doesn't always tend to our future self, right? So a single glass of wine savoured in the evening can be self-care, but if that then turns into 2 and 3 and all the other choices that come along with that, for me it's often watching TV till much later than I know I should be, then that's not self-care. And I think quite often it's confusing. When we need it the most, that's sometimes when it's really hard to make the most nourishing choice. But we learn and grow, and by having this conversation we can be more aware of, I need something right now, but I'm going to choose the thing that I'll thank myself for in the morning, right?
Absolutely. It's like when you are indulging in a bit of a binge on Netflix, when it pops up and it says, are you still watching this?
Yeah.
Because it's noticed you've been on for hours. I feel like we need that just generally in life. When you go reach to eat the whole cake rather than a slice, we need something that just goes, do you actually need this? And I guess that's just training your brain to do that, so that it does remain something to be savoured rather than something self-indulgent and that you might regret.
That's right. And I think drawing people's awareness to the distinction between true self-care and a crutch. Yeah. So a crutch would be turning to social media, numbing ourselves out with scrolling. It's comfort eating. It's excessive caffeine intake to kind of get us through our day, and then it's alcohol to soothe and help us wind down at the end of the day, or maybe it's online shopping, right? So these are things that help us cope in the moment, but they don't help us in the long run. They don't sustain us in the long run. So observing the difference between those, and just where possible, make the healthy choice as much as, I think the mantra is make a good choice as often as you can. We're all human, and I think it's really important that we acknowledge that this stuff is not easy. But, we build the mindfulness muscle together, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You just mentioned your future self and looking ahead. I guess the next spoke on the wheel is actually really relevant. Goal setting and accomplishments. Those are things that we want to achieve in the future. And presuming that this is all about giving yourself something to work for, giving yourself that purpose, that reason for getting your work done, getting your head down, or managing a situation, knowing that there's something at the end of it that is going to gratify you, which is going to be what you want. What do you say about goal setting and accomplishment? What do you mean by that when you talk about it?
Well, the last 2 spokes of the vitality wheel go beautifully together. And this is what people don't so often associate with self-care. So we've got goal setting and accomplishment, and the other one is values and purpose. And the reason why these two go so beautifully together is that, as you've already said, your goals are what you want to achieve. These are the things that research clearly shows that you are more likely to achieve what you set out to achieve when you've set a goal around it, because goals give us focus, they fire us up, and it's the purpose behind it. So your goal is what you want to achieve. The purpose is why you want to go for it. So that's why these two go so beautifully together. The reason why I've got accomplishment in there as well is that it's not just what you want to achieve and why, it's also our well-being is boosted by taking a look at what we've achieved, what we've got done. So it's not always looking forwards. It can be looking back and saying, wow, look at what I've weathered. Look at what I've overcome. And partway through a goal, you can look back and say, hey, maybe I'm not there yet, but look how far I've come. And this is enormously galvanizing.
Yeah. And I think it's a bit of an antidote to this sort of cultural, societal thing we have of obsession of being busy. You know, we're always just on this hamster wheel, or it certainly can feel like that with social media and having to pay the bills and, you know, WhatsApp pinging, your friends wanting to meet up. It can often feel a little bit overwhelming. And actually, when you pause and you take a look at, why am I doing these things? Are they going to get me more towards my goal? And actually, well, how far have I come? Like you say, looking back at things, hopefully that can be a bit of a treatment for this busyness epidemic that we just see so much. Is that something that you've come across a lot in your work with your clients?
Definitely, Becky, definitely. I think there's been a real opportunity to redefine what success looks like, what a well-lived life looks like. I think for so many of us, we associate success with productivity. And what I hope is that from this period, we've learned that sometimes the most productive thing that we can do is to stop and rest, to replenish. Yeah. It's been a real game changer. And I would hope that, we can take these lessons moving forwards and look at, on an individual case-by-case basis, what does a well-lived life look like to you? And how can you take those values off the page and imbue them in everyday life?
Absolutely. I mean, I took some time out yesterday. I had a no laptop, no screen kind of afternoon. And I knew it was what I needed. I was listening to my body. I was going, no, Becky, you need to just stop and have a rest and have some brain space. But yet I still had this little niggly voice of feeling guilty. You know, I knew that there were emails that I'd not yet answered. And I knew that there were, I don't know, a gift for my niece that I needed to research and buy, and some train tickets I needed to book. So I think, as you say, these things are easy, but hopefully it becomes muscle memory, you know, to do it and to feel okay with doing it and kind of giving yourself a break a little bit. But it takes a lot to get there if you are a busier and a doer.
I think it's a bit of an art form. And do you know what? Even for me as a yoga teacher, as a psychologist, one of the things about lockdown I found so challenging was that I was really faced with myself. You know, there was no escaping it. I was really aware of thoughts and feelings and sensations, and it's really confronting. So for people that aren't used to stopping, that aren't used to sort of more reflective practices, or there's a real art form, and go gently, you know, build the skills slowly, step by step. So in my book, Self-Care for Tough Times, I take people through that journey where if you're starting out, don't try and lie down or sit for half an hour and meditate. That's too hard. Start with something simple like watching a sunset or listening to a piece of music and being guided, or giving your mind something to anchor on.
Yeah.
And then once that feels doable and you can give yourself the permission and the time and space to do that, then you can look at building it at different practices. So start small.
Yeah. So what do you see coming up in the future of self-care, you know, going forwards? Are there any patterns of behaviour that you're noticing, or any new kind of therapies that are coming through that you think are going to get more mainstream?
Yeah, there is. You know, I've been talking about self-care for a decade now. And when I first started talking about it, people didn't know what it was. Everyone's heard of it now. But there are still some real barriers. And the barriers that I've identified are time, energy, expense, guilt, and knowledge. Now, from my experience, and with the hundreds of people that I've worked with and people that have read my books, they know that self-care needn't be huge, elaborate acts. Like we've already talked about, feeling your breath for a moment. None of these things take time or energy. So largely, we've been able to overcome the barriers of time, energy, expense, and knowledge. But the thing that looms really large is guilt. And even when people understand that self-care is healthcare, and without our health, what do we have? There are still people saying, I don't know that it's okay for me to do this. I don't feel worthy of it. So I feel like that is the next direction, that for people who are working in this sphere, we need to address issues of self-worth. We've got to address and heal trauma. From my experience, inner child work and trauma work is really powerful in unlocking people's ability to nourish themselves.
Yeah, really interesting. And just thinking about guilt and nourishing yourself as well, I do think we still have a barrier to that.
Mm-hmm.
Even if we are, I don't know, regularly meditating or understand what self-care is, I think there's still some sort of base level amongst a lot of us where we don't allow ourselves. It's almost like feeling guilty if you put yourself as number one.
Yes.
Because we're told that is, that's selfish. And I think it's just a learned behaviour.
Yeah, and for people who struggle with that, Becky, what I would suggest is it doesn't have to be me first. It's just me as well. Yeah, take care of yourself as well. You deserve it. Every human being deserves to be nurtured and cared for, regardless of what they've experienced, regardless of what they've been told. Everybody is worthy of that love and care.
Absolutely. So, Suzy, we're sort of almost out of time. If you could leave us with one mantra today, one thing that we should all go away and try and think about today, whether we write it on a sticky note, we just say it out loud once you've said it, or we think about it all day, meditate on it, whatever. What is it that you would say today to the listeners?
I would say it's about I give myself permission to nourish myself. Yeah? Give yourself permission. And if nourishment or, self-care feels uncomfortable, then I can be tender. I can just be tender towards myself. Start there.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Suzy Redding, thank you so much. It has been so interesting and enlightening speaking to you, and just thank you so much for your time today. I'm really grateful that you have taken time out to have a chat, and it's super useful. Everything that you've said, I'm sure will resonate with people, and hopefully they can implement it into their lives and have a bit more knowledge and understanding now about what actually self-care is and how we can make it an everyday practice. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Becky. Thanks so much. Take care of everyone. Take care of yourselves.
Thank you so much to Suzy Redding for joining me this week. If you'd like to check Suzy out, you can find her on Instagram at Suzy Redding, or she's suzyredding.co.uk. I'm also on Instagram at Becky Taylor. And if you'd like to book a class with me, you can do so at beckytayloryoga.co.uk. I would love to see you on the mat and practice with you. And I would love it even more if you were able to rate and review this podcast. It really, really helps. Thank you so much. Until next week, take care.